Well, thanks so much for being here today, Bethany. I'm so excited to talk to both of you.
Yeah, it's really fun. I can't wait.
So, we're wondering, with your role, what are some ways that you feel technology should be used in the classroom?
Well, so the first thing I think is important that everybody knows when you're going to use technology in the classroom, it has to be used to enhance whatever the learning expectation or the learning goal is in the classroom. You can't just use technology just for the heck of using it. So if you find something that you really like, then start thinking of a way that you can incorporate that into your classroom setting and with something that you're actually teaching. And I think that there's some really good ways to start off. I think it's important to start off with platforms that you have at least a basic understanding of. So if you wanted to start with something like Flipgrid,
Mhm.
Flipgrid's really big right now, or
Mm.
Seesaw. I think they're kind of interchangeable in this way that you're getting the kids used to recording themselves doing something and being able to take an idea or a response from their brain and actually vocalize it. And that is something that I think all teachers have found. They at least have one child that is extremely difficult for them, and it's not fun to do it in front of everybody in the classroom. So this is like a safe way that you can get them used to it, where they can really work towards that relationship with you and learning that you're somebody who they can, give an answer to, and you're going to actually help them to the right answer. And Flipgrid and Seesaw are both really easy platforms to understand. So I think that would be a really good way to start off. And as a teacher who's starting at the beginning steps, that to me would be really simple. The only learning curve you really have is just getting the kids on the platform and set up. And it's really simple, especially if you have a Google Classroom, you can just import from there and the kids will just take off with it. And you'll be really surprised at actually how fast they pick it up.
What are some just because you're talking about Flipgrid and I love Flipgrid,
Okay.
what are some different ways you've used it in your room where you were like, oh, that was like something really engaging for them?
Well, so I really like to have kids give like an afterthought of something, like to come back and then kind of summarize their learning,
Okay.
because
Mhm.
you can do a lot in the classroom, like walking around and getting things from the students and what they're saying, but they're also really caught up in what they're doing, and then what's their friend doing, and there's so many distractions in that moment. So I like for them to come at the end and then kind of take everything that they've taken in and really take a moment to think about it. So how is this connected and why is this important? And you don't really have to ask a lot of in-depth questions. Just ask them to tell you, what did they learn today, or how do you think that this thing that we did today went with this lesson that we learned yesterday? How do you think they're connected? And just get them talking and see what they can tell you. I really enjoy that. And I there's a slide on Pear Deck that I really like that says, if one of your friends was absent today and you had to teach them today's lesson, what would you say?
Oh,
So I
Ooh, we
love
put that.
that
Oh, that's
one.
that's a
awesome. I
really
love
good
that.
question.
Yeah, it's like a totally different mindset for them, because they're just used to, like, oh, I have to talk to you. But when they have to talk to a friend, it's different. And I like how in Flipgrid you have the option where they can respond to each other and see each other's responses if you want them to, and they have stickers and they can put things over their faces. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to handle people maybe getting nervous about, wanting to put themselves out there, because everybody is not meant to do that. And that's just not their thing. And then also, it's a really good way to teach a good section of digital citizenship where, despite what we might see going on with adult people in the world, we don't just go out there and just
Mhm.
blast people because we don't agree with something. Like,
Right.
this is a good way to say, okay, now, I need you to go and comment on three people's posts.
Mhm.
And I always think it's interesting that they don't always know the names of people in their classes.
Really?
Always weird to me.
That's interesting.
So it's a good way to get them, to pay attention to who's in their class, and maybe they could find something about someone that is similar to something that they think, or make a connection that they didn't know that they were going to make.
Right.
Do you use like a rubric for when they respond to each other? Because I noticed when I had people comment, they'd say, "This is good," or "I like it." Do you give them guidelines for what they have to say?
So coming from a language arts classroom, my least favorite question was, well, how many sentences does it have to be? Especially if they had to write a paragraph. There was this whole debate about paragraphs and how many sentences was a paragraph actually, because my last year teacher said it was this number. And, so I say in the beginning, at least, to be lenient and just see, because the first time they might be kind of nervous and they don't really know, and they're kind of hesitant to put themselves on somebody else's thing, because what if they don't know 3 people in the class? And then I would say from there, instead of specific guidelines, like if you only notice it's a couple people, maybe talk to those people and say, hey, do you think, is there a better way you could say this besides good?
Yeah.
Like, what's another way that you could, like, what was good about it? Can you tell them it was good because something else? And just try to encourage the lengthening of the sentence. I feel like when you go in with negatives, like don't,
Yes.
then they shut down, because they're like, oh, it's writing, which I hate. And now you're telling me I'm not doing it right. And they just can't. I think they already feel like they're not good at writing. They're not good at drawing. There's all these things that they come in feeling like they're not great at. So I try to keep those to a minimum for encouragement purposes.
Well, and I totally agree, because you're using video as a way for them to communicate their thinking. And a lot of kids, that might be the one way they are the most confident in explaining their thinking. Like those kids that do struggle with reading and do struggle with writing, that they have a time that they can really shine and share their thoughts in a meaningful way.
And the other thing that I like, that I think a lot of teachers will understand, it is really, I'm just going to say, it's really annoying to have to grade writing, because you have to read a lot of them. So if you get the kids talking, like when I'm cooking dinner, that's like my time that I can like zone out a little bit. So I put my AirPods in. Well, I could totally listen to what they're saying, and I would know whether or not they're saying something that we actually learned, or if they're making up something. I could tell. And all I have to do is have like a little piece of paper there, and I can put like a check mark or an X, like so-and-so totally didn't get this, but this person did. And I'm not really wasting time from something else I need to do. I'm like doing both things at once. And just listening to it, I would be listening to something else anyway. So
yep. I totally do the same thing with Seesaw on the couch. All teachers should download the app that they're using on their phone, because it's a great pastime when you're watching 90 Day Fiance. I'm just telling you.
Well, and I like Seesaw has the QR codes. And so I feel like QR codes, they're like the technology that's never going to die.
Yeah.
Because they were really big, and then they kind of hit a slump, and now they've come back. And like Seesaw especially has helped like rejuvenate them. And what kid is not going to think it's cool to scan something and see their face, Like they're going to love that. And you can put them around the school, and it's another good way to kind of get them out there with their voice. So,
yeah. So aside from QR codes and Flipgrid and Seesaw, do you have other things that you would suggest to teachers to help them be innovative within their classroom, whether they're a classroom teacher or they are teaching technology or STEM? Is there anything else you would want to add that is innovative?
well, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can go. So my school is a Google school. So we use a lot of Google things, and my very, very favorite Google app is Jamboard. I feel like it's the most underutilized, because like nobody really understands what you can do with it. So I personally like love that one.
I'm writing that down, because I don't use it very much, and I don't.
Oh my gosh.
I should
It's
now.
so cool, because you can put videos in there and pictures in there, and you have like a little pencil tool, and you have sticky notes you can write on, and you can collaborate on like one jam, and you can have like a whole thing set up and give kids different jams like you do for slides. Now, obviously, that's not always foolproof because, Johnny and Susie are on jam 1 and Tommy and Sarah are supposed to be on number 2, but somehow they're on number 1. Can happen. So you have to think through that one. But I just always envision, like, if I was a science teacher and I was teaching like the food chain or like a food web or an ecosystem, like that is like perfect because you can put all the pictures on there. You can draw all the arrows. You can show the connection. You can sticky note on there. You can have other kids go in and leave sticky note comments. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I'm just in love with Jamboard. I feel like when I first show it to the kids, they're like, oh, you were so excited about this white screen. But it's got so much potential. If you could even look at it as like a digital poster board. Instead of having to have posters that they're going to carry home on the bus and they come back looking like a hot mess and somebody stepped on them. And, it's like, this is all nice and it's in one location. And it's just, I don't know. I'm just like obsessed with Jamboard. So maybe that's just me. But I love it.
I'm really hoping I can try it now. That's what I'm thinking. Like, I honestly, I've seen it, obviously, on like when I press, my apps button. And if I'm being honest, I thought it was like a soundboard or something.
Right. It looks like a music thing from the icon.
Yeah.
Like, it's very misleading. But so I've seen, Naomi, I think y'all did like a game thing, like y'all made games or something. So that could be like a way that they could take that and they could like brainstorm on there about their game.
I like that.
Or if they're building, I don't know, like a tower, like they could brainstorm their ideas and they could sticky note, like, why do I think this idea is better than this other idea I had? Or what's the most important thing that I need to do to make sure that my tower is going to function correctly?
Right.
Does it matter more at the top? Does it matter more at the bottom? And so that's a really good way to get their ideas like solidified somewhere so they don't have one and then forget it,
Well,
I just think it's another, it's another tool people could use, like that you said, but they just don't know a lot about it. And it's kind of like it is with the rest of Google Apps for us. Because I know me and Naomi have talked about this before on the show, along with just us two. Like, a lot of times you don't want to use something because you have no idea what it is. If people just hear right now, like, hey, Jamboard, it's kind of like a planning sheet where you can, show things connected like that. They're going to be like, oh, I could definitely, like, now I'm thinking, I'm going to try this like next week. I'm thinking now, like, I already wrote down on my sticky note over here, like Jamboard, got to use it. So like now I'm kind of pumped about it because it's like one of those things. And I feel like that's why this segment's so important, because there's things that we don't use that we don't know about. And if someone else is using it, we can always find ways to use it in our room. So.
Well, it's hard because technology is such like a rabbit hole, like Flipgrid gets talked about a lot, and Seesaw, and like that stuff's really huge right now. But even if you don't use that stuff, you still could be a little concerned on how to use it because you don't know what you're doing. And there's always that hesitancy, especially like I find with classroom teachers because they're afraid to roll out something they don't know. And I totally get it because you only have an hour usually with your kids. So that's not a lot of time if something goes wrong and you're having to fix it. And, it's hard to have 30 little people who now have nothing to do. So
I totally get that. I feel Bethany, with the classroom teacher stuff. I get it.
Yeah, it's hard.
Oh man.
So one thing that we're wanting to know too, that I think this is going to be a big question for each of our people we're interviewing that we have talked about already is like, what is one big project you think all teachers should be doing when you're talking about technology?
I think the one that I used to do a lot and when I was in the classroom that really wowed the kids, but it's really not that difficult to do, is doing stop motion animation in Google Slides. It's really easy.
In Slides?
Yes, I really liked it because when I taught language arts, it was really easy to have them take something from the book that they really liked, just like a chapter, a segment, just something, and they could animate it in Google Slides. It's super simple. You just put all the characters or whatever on the slide, you just duplicate it, and every time you duplicate it, you move it a little bit. And then there's this cute add-on called Creator Studio, and you can take your little animation and actually make it a GIF. And they like to see things bouncing around and doing things. And I felt like it was really easy to integrate, especially into language arts. And I think that there's a lot of ways you could integrate that in other subjects as well. So it's just really, finding ways to make things work for you. So in social studies, if there's like a battle and you want the kids to talk about what specifically happened, we'll have them animate it and have them make a GIF of the battle. In science, you can have like a volcano erupt.
Oh, that's
because
cool.
in 6th grade, it's really important that they know what happens underneath the volcano, like what's going on below the surface that makes it happen. Or they talk about layers of the earth. So you could have one that like builds down into the earth.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, there's a ton of ways. And then once they have the GIF, they could put that on their social media or whatever they want to do. And, they learn things they don't realize they do when they're having fun. So I like that.
We literally talked about that in the last one. Like sometimes kids don't think they're learning because they're having that much fun, which we always say that's when like the true learning kind of happens. So, as a result of some of these different, technology, whatever you want to call your special, your specialty, what are some like results you see from kids?
Well, so they're more apt to do things, I feel like, because they're allowed creativity. If I gave everybody a piece of paper and told them that everybody has to write something from this one chapter, then there's not a lot of creativity in that, because writing is not their skill. Mm-hmm. And if writing was not your skill, then you're just going to blow that off, because you've probably heard in the past, like, you're not as good at it, and you already know that by this point. Y'all might have a different approach to that, having younger kids, but by the time I get them, they're pretty solidified on whether or not they're a good writer, a good reader, and a good artist. They pretty much know, and they can pretty much tell you, because somewhere along the lines they've already learned this. But they know what they are good at, and they know what they enjoy doing. And even from a young age, like I would say, even the pre-K and kindergarten kids, they know what they like, and they want to do things that they enjoy. So I would say, though, that, you can't always every day is not going to be something that everybody likes. So I do always preface everything with my kids, because in my curriculum, we go through every aspect of computer science and technology and computers. And so it's not just one thing. And I tell them, it's not about being perfect. It's about trying. Everybody in here is not going to grow up in code. Everybody in here is not going to be a hardware person or a networking person. That's just not reality, even in the computer world. So I'm not asking you to love it. I'm asking you to try it. And then I tell them at the end, tell me again, what are you being graded on? And they're like, okay, trying. And it tends to simmer them down when they want to complain about it, because they know, okay, well, next week we'll do something different, and maybe I'll like that more.
Do you ever see kids like do it and then they change their minds? I see that all the time. I feel like that makes me, and I know we've talked about it before too, where it's like, I'm not going to like this. And then I'm like, well, give it a shot. And then they do try it. And then like, I've even had kids that are now like in high school come back to me and they're like, well, I'm really thinking about considering a career in this because of projects we did in your class. And I'm like, exactly. And you told me you were going to hate it. So
see, that's my goal. And I was listening to a podcast one day, and the guy said, we don't do things to make everybody happy. He said, my goal is that in the future, my student might be the only one standing in the room when they say, who's had experience with this? And he can say, oh, well, I mean, I did in high school at one point. Okay, well, you get this job and nobody else does because you're the one experienced. And I'm always thinking, yeah, okay. And I told him, we're doing like web design one week. You don't like it? Don't go into a career doing that.
Yeah.
In high school, if they offer that class, don't take that class because you don't enjoy it. I'm waiting to see what happens in January when we get into our hardware unit and they have to dissect a computer and then rebuild it.
Cool.
Oh, that'll be really cool. You're gonna have to keep us updated on that one. Yeah.
Well, because how cool would you feel being 10 and you can leave school and go home and say, guess what I did? I built a computer. I mean, that just seems so unrealistic as far as like standards you would set for yourself. So I'm like, okay, well, that's not a hard thing. Let's blow that out of the water. And okay, so you built a computer. What's next? What are you going to do now?
That's
super cool. How did you make that possible? Like building, like getting all that stuff. That is incredible.
Okay, so I do have to say my husband is in technology, like way more advanced than I will ever be. And so I use him a lot as a standard, like if I had to have a student, I always put them up against him. Like he was dyslexic. He was horrible at reading. He was one of those years did not get phonics. So he can't sound out a word to save his life. We live in a really rural place. So I just say that he just makes up words because where we live. But, he uses Google to help him, spell and things like that for his job. He didn't go to college. He started when he was in middle school playing around with computers and built his first one in middle school and just started like automating his blinds and just, little kid things that I guess you want to do. And so whenever, like, especially when I have parents come in and they're concerned about their child academically, I'm like, look, it's not because they're not trying, but everybody's not meant to be in the academic field. And my husband makes like way more money than I do, and he has less academia than I have. So I'm like, it's fine. And when I see a kid come in and they're struggling, I'm like, okay, well, he was good because he found his niche. So let's help them find theirs. Yes. That's the thing that we really need to be focused on. And I took like one of those like online courses for IT, I guess, just so that I could like really get a good foundation for it before I started doing computer science. And that was one of our lessons. It was like a digital one. We had to digitally build a computer. And then he brought a computer from downstairs because we have them all over our house because of what he does. And he set it on the table and he was like, label the parts. And I was like, oh, I didn't know we were having a pop quiz before dinner. Wish you had let me know that. That would have been nice. So that was pretty much, when he did that and I took all the pieces out and put them back in, I was like, okay, I feel like I could do this with the kids. Really not as hard as it seems like it is. And they're all really excited about it. So
yours is way more complicated than what I do with kindergarten. I think kindergarten and first grade, I have little paper versions of computers. Yeah. So I have a tablet for kindergarten and then a little laptop for first grade, and same kind of concept, more simple, that we're going to build the computer. I've been doing air quotes for those of you listening, but help them learn the hardware. And they get and it's paper and they're proud of themselves that they made it.
But it is cool because you can still say it. The part about building the computer is really knowing what the pieces are, why are they in there, and how do they work together to actually create the computer. And then I want them to see that on a big scale on a desktop and then think about that in terms of their iPhone. Because their iPhone's a computer too. And like last week, we had this super nerd lesson on like GUI interfaces and what that is. And I was like, guys, y'all probably know more than like half the people in this building right now. This is rich, important things.
Exactly.
So, that was fun because we were talking about Microsoft and Apple and why they don't like each other. And it was just kind of naturally like, what kid doesn't love a good drama story about people who get mad at each other. So it was just
So-
fun for them, and they learned. So that was important.
Right. And one question that we're going to ask, and we're calling this the STEM Mastermind series, but for you, we'll call it the STEM with the emphasis on T, the technology. So you're a technology mastermind is the way we're wording it. What is one piece of advice you would give other teachers wanting to become kind of like the technology mastermind in their classroom or maybe their school or whatever?
Well, I would say starting is the first step. You can't be afraid of it, and you just kind of have to get in there and get your feet wet a little bit. And then don't be afraid to keep searching for things. Like if you haven't found that thing that you love, that just really opens up your students, there is something. Just keep looking for it.
Mhm.
And every time you find something, think about, okay, what are we studying in our class, and how can I incorporate this? If you like it, then what you enjoy doing is going to come off, and the kids are going to like it a little more because you're excited about it. So that I think is important. I think just like getting as much as you can, like podcasts are really good. There's good books out there. There's, people that you can follow on Twitter and social media. Like there's just so much you can do to constantly be part of everything that's going on in technology. And I just have to say, like, don't ever feel like you don't know something, because I wouldn't believe anybody that said they're a genius at technology, because there's too much of it. It changes too often. Anybody who tells you that, I don't believe that for a second. So don't feel like you're underqualified, because you're definitely not.
Right. Mm-hmm. So as we kind of wrap up here, where can our listeners maybe find you at, or maybe what is something you're working on right now that you're really excited about too, that maybe you want to let them know about?
Well, so I took a break from my podcast when the pandemic happened, because I have 2 kids, and that was just like crazy time. And I have a deaf son. So deaf children are unbelievably loud.
Oh.
So I don't even think my mic would be able to even like mute him out. So I have started, I found a good like routine. I started getting my podcast back together, and hopefully I will get on track with more like Teachers Pay Teachers stuff. And something I did during the pandemic was I did a lot of free, I did a lot of free Zooms to just like do trainings for Google and for everything else. My most popular training is using technology to assess student content.
Cool.
So I just did like a 3-part podcast series about that, like all these different ideas and ways that you can use technology to do that. And I don't know, maybe in the future that will become something more. I would love to give you like a specific answer, but
hey,
I always find that when I try to be specific, God has another plan, and it's just like, well, there you go.
Exactly. Do you want to tell them what your podcast is so they can look it up now?
So my podcast is called Teaching with Tech, but there's no G, so it's a 9. So it's like teaching, and then it's got a 9 with tech. And it's on Anchor, but you can find it on like Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
I think
all the other, anywhere that you listen to podcasts.
That's the nice part about Anchor for sure. As far as your email, if they want to reach out, maybe ask you a question, or should they do that on social media or?
So Instagram, I use probably more than anything else social media wise, but I do have a Gmail account that's teachingwithtech@gmail.com, and it's spelled the same way as the podcast. So I don't have a lot of junk mail in there. So I should be like really easily seeing emails in there. So that would be a good place if you want to shoot me an email. If you find me on Instagram, you can send me a message and I'll respond. And I usually see those pretty quickly. Instagram's pretty good about that. Facebook sometimes not good about people sending you messages on your actual page.
Yeah.
So I've learned that the hard way.
Well, Thank you so much for being here and a part of our first of many of our STEM Mastermind series. So we'll continue to interview current teachers who are teaching STEM and technology, some of our best, like Bethany. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to be updated when those are released, as well as follow us on social media at the Innovative Teacher Podcast, as well as our bonus content on Patreon to get all those goodies in one place. Thank you so much again, Bethany, and thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again, Bethany, for being here. We're so excited to have you in our Mastermind series. So tell us what led you to be in the position, what led you to where you're at today.
Okay, so I started back in 2010, just being in the classroom as a language arts teacher. And, everything was going great. And then I started picking up more and more technology along the way, incorporating it more. And then this past year, we all know the pandemic happened and we were home. And I was just talking to my boss one day, like, here's some ideas. And she said, well, I have an idea, but give me a couple days. I want to run something past you. So then she calls me a few days later. So of course I'm like on edge for a few days. And she says, hey, I was just thinking, what if you switched roles with the person who's in the computer lab and you did like computer science, but we'll call it computer literacy because my degree is so I've got like a middle grades reading, and then I've got 6th grade through 12th grade language arts. And she said that way, you won't have to worry about having to have like a technology degree or anything like that. It still counts. But Georgia is coming up with, kind of having curriculum, like they have standards, and you can write all the curriculum for the whole class and pretty much do whatever you want as long as you align it to the standards. So I was like, oh, that sounds like a dream. So I thought about it for a little while, and then I accepted it. And then I got to work writing curriculum for what we're going to do the whole year. And now we have been in school since maybe August 7th. So we're about, like 3 months in, and so far so good.
That's awesome. I love like that journey, just even like your principal believed in you and how you could switch it up and do something else that you really love. That's so amazing.
Yeah, it was really nice. I think I had been a Google trainer, so I think that helped a little, helping with that in the school. And she saw me actually doing things in the classroom. And so she knew based on that it would be good.
Well, we're so excited to talk to you about all the amazing things. We can't wait to learn from you today.
Oh, I can't wait either.